All right, this is a reshoot. I just did a little video. So this is going to be about wiring of the solar panels on top of the RV. Because the more I think about it, the more I'm doing it, the more that I get into this thing, it's too much shit out there as far as that. And you can't go to a website and find out anything. You got to go to 9 websites, bookmark that shit, figure out this, compare that. It's too confusing for me. I'm gonna do all this in one place, which is right here, right now. With that being said, we're gonna have 4 solar panels. We're using Renogy 100-watt solar panels. You gotta have a minor grasp of how electrical works. And look, this is why I had to reshoot this. If you look at this video and then go do some shit without fact checking it, and you blow your charge controller out or burn your trailer up or shock yourself or hurt yourself or fall off the top and break your leg and then get bit by a snake or some crazy shit, none of that is my fault. As a matter of fact, this is just information. Once you take this information off of my video and go do some shit, that is on you. The only thing I did was put this out there, whether it's accurate or not. This is the way I'm going to do it. So if I burn up and die, that's okay. But if you do some of this shit and something happens, then you're an idiot. I'm not saying I'm not an idiot. We all know that's a fact, right, baby?
Yes.
I'm the most smartest idiot you ever met. So with my little disclaimer there, I'm not going to tell you to do anything dangerous. I'm just going to show you some things. And when I say you, I mean us. I'm going to show us some things. So, with that being said, a little grasp of electricity, whatever. This is 12-volt systems. This is not 120-volt AC. This is 12-volt DC, direct current, not AC alternating current like in your house when you plug shit in. We don't have an inverter in our trailer. We are just running 12-volt shit. Unless we go to an RV park and plug in, then we have access to our microwave and our air conditioner. Now you can get inverters and do that, but we're not doing that. We're keeping it simple. Anyways, so the way electricity works is things are rated in watts. You get a 100-watt solar panel, and the way that you figure watts, a 100-watt light bulb or anything, is you take the voltage that you're using times the amperage that it draws, the current. And so, you know, a 100-watt solar panel, now granted, solar panels don't charge 12 volts, they charge about 18. So you take 100 watts divided by 18 gives you 5.5 amps. 5.5 times 18 is 100. That's how voltage times amperage equals wattage. Wattage is the energy produced. So, with that being said, the way I always looked at it is I kind of look at electricity, and I do a lot of electrical on my job, not 12-volt DC, but 110 AC, alternating current, like plugs and stuff in houses. I was taught kind of that electricity is like water, you know, like a pressure washer. So the voltage is like the pressure, and the amperage is like the volume of water. So Niagara Falls has a lot of amperage because there's a ton of water going over. It's the amount of water moving. Wherein, like, you get rapids and stuff in a river, that means the voltage is increasing because the pressure is changing. But where the river is flatter, you still got the same amount of water going through there, but it's not running as fast. So that's where the voltage would drop, but you still have the same current. So with that being said, volts won't kill you. They just shock the shit out of you. You know, like a stun gun. That's like 10,000 or 50,000 volts. They pop you with it, but it's like a cajillionth of an amp. Now, granted, when you go to start your truck, it's only 12 volts, but it might pull 200 or 300 amps. Go stick your tongue on the battery while mama turns the key. It will fry your ass. Just saying. So, with this, we want to be careful. I'm going to flip this around. There's several ways that we can wire multiple solar panels. You can wire them in series. You can wire them in parallel, or there's a special way. Now, I'm going to turn this around because I need to light this butt. So, we got 4 solar panels up top. Oh, sweet nicotine. We got 4 solar panels up top. Down here in South Texas, parallel is the ideal way to wire them. Now, there's some advantages to parallel. Well, parallel's the best, except for in low light situations. If you are in Colorado, or out west, or even here in South Texas where there is a shit ton of sun all day long, this is the way to do it. Because when you wire it in parallel, you get all of the amperage of the solar panels. Remember, these are 100-watt solar panels. The 100-watt solar panel has 18 volts. It puts out 5.5 amps. Let me use a pencil to point. So when you wire them in parallel, what it does is it keeps the voltage. So say these are all 18 volt, but say one of them's putting out 16 volts. When you wire all these 4 together, it's going to take the voltage of the lowest solar panel. So if one of these is only putting out 16 volts, you wire all 4 of them together, you're only going to get 16 volts. But these are all 18. They're pretty well balanced. So you get 18 volts, but you get to add the amperage, which is 22 amps. 22 amps is a lot. Well, it's pretty good. You can do 22 amps probably on a 12 gauge wire. And again, this is just in optimal conditions. When the sun is directly overhead and is pounding on your solar panels, you're going to get 18 volts, you're going to get 22 amps. Chances of that happening are just slim. I mean, those days, you get some clouds, or once the sun, about 6, 7 o'clock, the sun gets over towards where it's setting, then all of a sudden you're not going to be pulling 100% optimal 18 volts. But you always got to have, at least to charge the battery is 12.6 volts. You need 12.6 volts to run any of the things inside the trailer that run on 12 volts, whether it be the refrigerator, the lights, the fan for the heater, the fan in the bathroom, or the fan over the stove. All of our 12 volt shit, charge your phone, you need 12 volts. So on the same token, in order to put the amperage, which these items use, back into the battery, you gotta have, 13 and a half, like an alternator in a car. You gotta have that. The voltage is the key to the battery. Think of the battery like a storage unit, and you want to put shit in your storage unit. You can show up to the storage unit with all sorts of shit, which would be the amperage. I want to put all this shit in my storage unit, but if you don't have the key to the door, you can't get it in there. The key is 12.8 volts. I would say more like 13 and a half. So if you're not pulling 13 and a half volts, that 22 amps is not going to matter at all. You're just going to be standing outside your storage unit with a fucking truckload of shit. Anyways, with that being said, our refrigerator runs, when it's running, it runs at 5 amps. The amperage is the storage that you have inside the battery. So what we have is 100 amp hour batteries. We got 2 of them. Every hour the refrigerator runs, it pulls 5 amp hours out of there. So, and we have AGM batteries, not lithium. So the AGM battery is absorbent glass mat. It's just basically, instead of being flooded with the acid and shit in the plates, just in the bath, it's mats that surround. It's like a jacket on each plate. With that being said, you don't want to deplete an AGM or a lead acid battery. More, 50% is the max, because once you do that, it never really goes back to 100%. Whereas the lithium batteries, like the batteries you put in your tools or things like that, those batteries you can deplete to 0 and then add them back. So while our refrigerator is running, it's pulling every hour, it's pulling 5 amp hours out of our 200 amp hour storage. We have 200 amp hour batteries. Granted, they're AGM batteries, so they can only go down to 50%. So really, we have 50%, and 50% is 50 amp hours, 50 amp hours. So 200 amp hour batteries really equals about 100 amp hours of storage. So if we just covered the solar panels and turned the refrigerator on for 20 hours, it would kill the batteries. And then we would need 20 hours of solar charge at 5 amps to fill it back up. So when the refrigerator is running at 5 amps and we have one 100-watt solar panel charging at 5 amps, that is just going to replenish what the battery takes, or the refrigerator takes out of the battery. So all that's going to do is maintain. The minute you turn something else on, then you're depleting. You need another solar panel. So what you need to do is have at least 10 amps so that you can charge double what you're using. That way your batteries always stay full. With that being said, parallel is fantastic if you have optimal sun. Once the sun goes down to the side and you're only pulling half of this voltage, these 22 amps don't matter. So the other option other than parallel, and this is easy enough to do. I don't think I even said, I just showed the picture with all these fucking lines. So to do it in parallel, which is great in high optimal sun conditions, which is most of the Western United States, but not Alaska. You just take the positive and the positive and the positive and the positive, and you run all the positives to your charge controller. Then you take the negative, the negative, the negative, the negative, and run all your negatives to your charge controller. And then it keeps the same voltage, but you add all the amperage. Now, to wire them in series, it's a little different. You wire them in series, what it does is it adds the voltage together, but the amperage stays the same as the amperage rating of the lowest panel. So 5.5, if you have one panel that's 4 amps, then you're only going to charge 4 amps. These are well balanced, 5.5. So in series, you add the voltage, amperage stays the same. Why is this good? Why is this bad? I'll tell you why it's bad. Because all you're ever going to charge, whether you have 4 or 8 or 17 or 6 million solar panels, you're only going to charge 5.5 amps. And as we know, this is what we need to put into the battery to fill it up, is the shit at the storage unit, all the shit in your truck. If you want your storage unit to be full, you got to put that shit in there. Now, granted, it's only a 12-volt system, so what is 72 volts good for? Well, 72 volts is good. It doesn't matter as long as you don't blow out your charge controller. Like, you can't do this with a PWM, which is a pulse width modulation. You need to have the MPPT, because then you're getting pretty high on voltage. And the more you add, the more you have to add to the voltage. But the charge controller will take care of the voltage. It'll dissipate that and only put 13.5, 14 volts into the battery so you don't burn it up. But you can only have 5.5. The good thing about this is if the sun is at optimal up high, you're going to get 5.5 volts when it's directly overhead, because you're getting 70 or amps, because you're getting 72 volts. But once the sun gets over to the side and you're only pulling half of the efficiency on the solar panel, half of 72 is still 36 volts. So these four work together to put together 36 volts. So you'll still be putting 5.5 in. Whereas over here, if you have half sunlight, you're putting nothing in. So while 22 amps is badass, it's a lot more better than 5.5. With half sunlight, you're still getting 5.5. And then even with quarter sunlight, you're still getting 18 volts. So it's still putting 5.5 in. So over here, you can put 22 amps in maybe for 3 hours a day. But over here, you can put 5.5 amps in. And 3 hours at 22 would be 66 amp hours. But over here, you're going to be putting 12 hours a day of charge back into the batteries, right? 12 times 5.5 is 60 plus, that's 66. Funny how that works. 3 hours, 66 amp hours. 12 hours, 66 amp hours. Granted, I don't like the 5.5 amps and I don't need 72 volts. I was like, dude, it'd be cool. It'd be cool if I could get more volts than that, but more amps than that. Is there a way that I can do that? The answer is, you're damn right you can. And I'm going to show you how, because that's what we're going to do. Boom. What we're going to do is called a hybrid or series parallel. I looked all over the internet. They want to make things, they don't want you doing this. They want you hiring somebody to come out and do this. I'm telling you, bro, you can do it. Or ma'am, I terribly apologize to my female counterparts out there. Or they. whatever your preferred pronoun is, this can be done by he, she, they, non-binary, whatever. Let's not get into all that. Anybody can do this as long as you have half a brain and opposable thumbs. And you follow these careful directions. So what we do is, this is called a string. So I have these 4 solar panels. So what I'm going to do, instead of wiring them in series or wiring them in parallel, I'm going to wire this bank or string in series. So that's going to give me 36 volts, but I'm going to stay at 5.5 amps. Then I'm going to wire this string in series, which is going to give me 36 volts and 5.5 amps. And then I'm going to take those, because in series we add the voltage, not the amperage, but in parallel we add the amperage. So you take this positive here and you run it to this negative, which leaves you a loose positive and a loose negative. Then you take this positive and run it to this negative. Now these are in series. This gives you a loose positive and a loose negative. Then you take these 2 positives, put them together, run them to the positive port of your charge controller. And then you take these 2 negatives and run them to the negative port on your charge controller. And at that point, we add the amperage. So I have 36 volts and 11 amps. So even with the sun at half, I'm still getting 18 volts. And if it even at a third, which is where the sun is probably going to be most of the time, is probably about 40%. 40% times 36 is 12, and 24 is 14.5 volts. So at 40% sunlight, I'll be charging 11 amps. Now, the important thing of all of this is like in Ghostbusters, man, don't cross the streams. If you cross any of these streams, it's gonna spark. I'm gonna tell you, and if you go to wire solar panels, either A, do it at night, or B, put a towel over the solar panel, because the minute the sun hits it, it's putting out 18 volts. So if you go crossing shit, it's not gonna hurt you, but you run a risk of damaging the solar panel, and they're not cheap. So in Alaska, the sun is, in June and July, the sun is never full. It doesn't get up overhead. It only stays about 40 degrees or whatever off the horizon, you know, maybe halfway up to what I would call 90 degrees is straight ahead. It stays about halfway. It goes up and then it goes down. So it goes like this all day and bounces off the horizon all day. It gets dark, you know, when the sun sets and you still have the dusk, the sky is still illuminated, but then the sun's going to come right back up an hour or 2 later, and then you have dawn. So dusk and dawn almost run together, and what they call that is civil twilight. Civil twilight. So it's always going to be light when we're up there. By the time, you know, it's always going to be light. And so there, series would be the best, because series is the low light optimal, but I need more than 5.5 amps. You just add more solar panels. Now, granted, when you run it in parallel, one thing to be wary of, you can run as many of these as you want, as long as your charge control in series, because the voltage goes up, but that's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to burn any wires up, because wires get hot because of the amperage, the load that they're carrying. 72 volts, as long as you got a charge controller that can handle it, you can wire as many as you want in series. Parallel, on the other hand, at 22 amps, 12 gauge wire is pushing it. You might want to do a 10 gauge wire just to be safe. And then the more you add, the higher this amperage gets. And while amperage is badass, you got to have, pretty soon you're going to have a big ass wire that's not going to fit in your charge controller. We think this is going to work for us. I hope this was informative, man. This video went way long, longer than the one before, but dude, the one before was great, but I didn't talk about, if you take this information and go out to your properties, your trailer, your solar panels, your stuff, and you do something and it pops, burns, hurts, breaks, dies, I want you coming back and saying, well, fucking JMF said I could do this. No, I'm not telling you to do shit. I'm telling you what we're going to do. You can do this if you want. It will work. Just be careful. Always fact check the bearded freak to make sure that what I'm telling you is true. Because you can't believe me. You can't believe everything you see on YouTube. You need to fact check this. Go find the smartest guy you know, show him this video, and if you get the thumbs up, do what I said. If you don't, you lost 20 minutes of your life, and I don't know what to tell you about that, because I am not sorry. Have a good day. Bye-bye now.